You know that gorgeous designer dress or outfit that you absolutely fell in love with? The one that you feel you will look perfect in and it makes you feel so confident when you wear it to your next special occasion. But then you look at the price tag and you think this is absolutely unattainable for me. But wait, you really love this look. So what are you gonna do? Remember, you have a skill. One that allows you to design, create, and draw inspiration from the beautiful things around you. And that's not exactly what we're going to be talking about today. But what we are going to be talking about is how to add feathers to your outfit. Hello everyone. I'm Aletha with Ribbons and Zippers. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. Because today I'm going to show you how to sew on feathers to this gorgeous top. It's a designer top that I'm inspired by, and we're going to learn today some tips and techniques on how to add these gorgeous feathers. So this is a designer top by La Pointe. My client fell in love with this top and she wanted me to make it for her. No problem, I got this. Because as you can see, it is a stretch fabric. It's made out of jersey, which makes it so easy to work with. And jersey, of course, is so forgiving. So no need for a lot of fittings. So it has this built-up neckline, which is very easy to do. And it has these fitted dolman sleeves that gives it a nice loose fit under the arms. And I love that it has this tapered waistline that goes out towards the hips. And of course, the statement feature of this top is these beautiful feathers on the sleeve. They're ostrich feathers and they are so eye-catching. Okay guys, as you know, when you sew a dress or an outfit that is inspired by a designer's piece that you saw, for the most part, you are going to find it a little difficult to match the fabrics and the trimmings such as the feathers. You're just going to have to try to find fabric that is as close as possible to the designer's fabric, so especially if you are trying to go for a certain look. Now in this case, this is a stretched jersey and the feathers that I'm using is wrapped in a band and the band does not stretch. So I'm going to show you how I addressed that issue. But before I show you how I attach the feathers, you may be wondering about the top, how that was made. Well, you can check out my video that shows you how to draft 3 easy built-up neckline designs. In particular, check out the part 2, which shows you how to do a raised cow neck. Okay, so let's get on to the feathers. Okay, so my first step was to cut 5 strips of feathers for each arm or for each sleeve. So I determined that I was going to cut each strip of feathers 10 inches, and I determined that by the widest part of my client's hand, so 10 inches each. So I cut 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strips, or rather 5 strips for each sleeve. Next, I want to determine how long I want the band to be, because I am creating a cuff that's going to enclose my feathers. So the feathers are about a 1/2 inch wide, or the band that holds the feathers is about a 1/2 inch wide. So I need to take that into consideration because I'm going to have 5 layers of feathers, and each feather is going to be enclosed inside of the band. I'm going to lay my feathers out and measure how much space I have. So when I measure this, I get 3 inches. So I need to double that because, as I said, I am enclosing each band. So I get 6 inches, but I need to take into consideration my seam allowance. So I'm going to cut 7 inches. From some scrap fabric, I am going to measure out 2 pieces of fabric that is going to be 7 by 10 inches. So I'm going to cut 2, and they're going to be on the grain. Remember, this is stretch fabric. You want to cut on the grain crosswise and lengthwise. So I'm going to cut 2. Okay, so here are my rectangles cut out, and it is 7 inches by 10 inches. So yes, it's 7 inches by 10 inches. So that's exactly how I wanted it. And this is the length of my cuff. This is the feathers, and I am going to measure on the right side of my fabric and draw lines for my feathers. And I suggest, you can use chalk, but I suggest a chalk wheel like this one. You can get it on Amazon. It easily rolls over the jersey without pulling. It has chalk on the inside. You can refill it if you want. You can get it on Amazon. It's a great tool to have. I'll show you how it doesn't pull, but it makes a really nice straight line. So here's some scrap fabric. You see how easily it rolls across, and the line is nice and straight. So I'm going to measure my cuff 1 inch increments, 1¼ inch from the top, and then 1 inch all the way down to the bottom. So I'm going to use my see-through ruler to help me to get started, because I can see the 1¼ inch line very well. And I can line up the fabric along that line so that it's nice and straight, and I'll get a nice straight line. So I'm going to go ahead and start my first line. Okay, so starting at the 1¼ inch, I'm going to measure 1 inch increments all the way down. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need one more line because we need 6 inches, remember? So I'm going to make one more line. And so we have 6 inches, and we have 1/4 inch on one end for the seam, and 3/4 inch on the other side to make our hem, or to sew it down nice and neat. So again, I love this little wheel. It doesn't pull the fabric, it just glides across the fabric so nicely. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches plus my seam allowances and my hem. All right, so we have our 7 inches, and we are ready to move on to the next step. Okay? Okay, so before I move forward, I want to show you how my lines came out. They're nice and straight and prominent. It is chalk, so it might start to fade, but you can always go over it. Now I want to show you, I need to make some guidelines on the inner seam of my cuff. So that's going to be about 1/4 inch. I need a starting point and an ending point. All right, I'm going to start my feathers about 1/4 of an inch and end about 1/4 of an inch. This is so that I can reduce bulk. And this guideline is just for a visual so that I could know that I am always at 1/4 of an inch. And my little wheel is going to help me to create a nice straight line. I love this little wheel. It just brings the chalk onto the fabric without pulling. I can't say that enough. And if you run out or it feels like it's not coming out, just give it a little shake and it will come out. And so I have my first guideline at 1/4 of an inch, my starting point, my ending point. Okay, so I'm just going to go over here and do it one more time. So wherever you start or end, it's the same because the fabric is a rectangle, everything is evenly spaced. All right, so okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our feathers. Now the feathers have this binding. One side is a little bit wider than the other side. You want to place your feathers with the wide band showing up, and I'm going to place it on the 3/4 of an inch line. And remember, we made our feathers, I cut my feathers to be 10 inches or 11 inches. And remember, my arm, this is the sleeve arm, is only 9 inches. So what I want to do is lay it here, and I'm going to stretch it out. Start from the 1/4 inch and stretch. And when I sew, I'm going to make sure that my fabric is stretched out, so the top edge of the band is going to be right up against my first line at 1/4 of an inch down and 1/4 of an inch over. And then I'm going to stretch my fabric out, okay, and I'm going to use my lightning stitch or my zigzag stitch to sew these feathers down. And then I'm going to remove this band because this band does not stretch. This will not go around, stretch around your arm and pull back tightly to your wrist. So what we have to do is we have to remove that band so that only the feathers remain, and that when the fabric is stretched out, it'll pull back. Okay, so it might be a good idea to make your markings on the other side of the fabric as well, so that you can see. We're going to go over to our sewing machine and start sewing our feathers down to our cuff. So the first row, we're going to do 2 rows of lightning stitch. Then we're going to add the next row, and we're going to do 2 rows of light or zigzag stitch, whichever kind of stitch you're using for stretch fabric. And we're going to add the 3rd row, and we are going to keep doing this process until we have all of our feathers laid down on our cuff. We're going to start from the bottom, and we're going to start sewing down, sewing our fabric closed, enclose the feathers. But I'll show you how it's done. Now before I move on, I'm just going to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit the bell so that you can be reminded every time I do a video that's just for you. Okay, so I have my cuff, and This is my 3/4 of an inch line, my guideline from the bottom of my cuff. All right, so I want to take my feathers and I want to make sure that I am using the widest part of the band facing up. Have that widest part of the band facing up, and then I'm going to take my feathers and make sure that they're facing down towards the bottom of my cuff at the 1/4 of an inch mark, because remember, we don't want any bulk. And I'm going to place my feathers on this line. This is my guideline. Now I can see through the feathers, and I want the top of that band to be right up against that line. Okay, that's very important. Now I can stretch my band out, and I'm going to secure my feathers at the 1/4 inch line like this, and I'm going to stretch my feathers out. But first, let me go ahead and secure the feathers so they won't move. So it's at that 1/4 of an inch mark, 3/4 of an inch down, and I'm just going to secure it with a pin. Okay, so once I secure my feathers, I can now stretch my cuff out. I just want to make sure that I have all the feathers out of the way and that I can see my line. Even if the line is a little faded, I can still see it. That's the most important thing. So I just want to make sure that my feathers are up against that line. And now with that, I can secure the other end as well. So that way I can easily stretch my feathers out. All right, so the 1/4 of an inch guideline, and the band is right up against that 3/4 of an inch line, which I can see through. And I'm just going to go ahead and pin that down. Let's secure that down. Okay, so now, as you can see, I can stretch my cuff. You see how the cuff stretches? That's important. I want to stretch while I am sewing. So that's why I'm using my zigzag or my lightning stitch to get a good stretch while I'm sewing, and so my feathers will bounce back. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this all the way across. I mean, you don't have to use a lot of pins. I'm just going to use as many pins as I need, and then I'm going to sew 2 stitches across the top of the band at my 3/4 of an inch guideline. Okay, so I'm going to sew my feathers down with a zigzag stitch, or in my case, my lightning stitch, right at the top of this band. And as you can see, while I'm going to stretch just slightly so that my cuff is the length of my band. Even though I pinned it, I still want to pull it or stretch it so that it's the right length. And I'm using, again, my lightning stitch. Okay, so here we have it. I have attached my first band of feathers, and you can already see the stretch. So this is the band that holds the feathers on, which I will be taking off. But before I do, I'm going to continue on and add the next row of feathers. So once I add all of my feathers, you can see the line. This came out really good. So I'm going to fold up the fabric onto the feathers to give it one more row of lightning stitch. That's going to really hold the feathers in place. So I have 2 rows of lightning stitches, and then once I fold the fabric up, I'll have another row of lightning stitch, and it will really hold those feathers in place. So I'm going to just keep on going down with my feathers, and I'm going to take off the band once I'm done. And you're going to see how really this looks so good. All right, so just continue with the process. Okay, so here we have it. This is my feathered cuff. This is what it looks like with lots of feathers. It's very pretty. So the next step is to go and trim off my bands. I have to remove them, and I'm going to do them one by one. And we have to do that because you see these bands don't move. You see? They don't stretch, and that's not good. Because when you're putting your arm into a sleeve that is a knit fabric, the sleeve needs to stretch around the width of your hand. So we want it to fit snugly on our wrist, but we want it to stretch so that it goes over the widest part of our hand, which is why I have to remove these bands, and which is why I used a stretch stitch in the first place. Okay, so after I remove these bands, I am going to secure the feathers in a casing, or I'm going to enclose the feathers in the fabric. So I'm going to fold the fabric up like this, and then I'm going to, with a lightning stitch or a zigzag stitch, I'm going to make a row, and that's going to enclose the feathers up nice and secure because I want these feathers to be nice and tight. I don't want them to come out. Okay guys, so I just want to show you how this looks, and I just want to give you a tip. When you do the zigzag stitch or your lightning stitch, the 2 rows, make sure that they are very close. So you want your stitch length to be very small because you really want those plumes to stay on. They're very, very thin and fragile, and they will slip through if you have a wide stitch. Now once I did the 2 rows, I used a very small pair of sharp scissors such as these to snip the binding away from the plumes. So we're going to be cutting the plumes at the binding. Please don't cut the thread, okay? And this is what it's going to look like, nice and tight. So once you have these 2 rows, then you're going to enclose them, and then you're going to use another lightning stitch or zigzag stitch, and you're going to make these enclosures, okay? Okay, so you may have some extra space here in between your enclosures. So what you can do is you can fold up that space and make another pass of stitches. You just want to make sure that all of your feathers are out of the way, and then go ahead and make another pass of stitches, and your feathers will be nice and close together. So you see how this stretches? That's the point. You want to use a zigzag or lightning stitch. Okay, so here we have our beautiful cuff covered with these beautiful feathers, and as you can see, it stretches. That's because I use the lightning stitch everywhere, so I'm always going to have that stretch. I'm always going to have this beautiful stretch, and this looks great. So now once you add your feathers to your cuff, The next step is, as you can see, I attached it to my sleeve. So here we have it. So now, you just want to make sure that the sleeve is open and you attach it that way. So what I'm going to do is, because I don't want these ridges that were made by attaching the feathers, what I need to do now is cover that up. Okay, so we're going to cover it up. How we're going to cover it up is we're going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance to the bottom of our feather cuff. This is a 3-inch band. It measures 9.5 inches by 3 inches. Now yours definitely may be different. It depends on the width of your arm size and your hand size. We want it to be able to stretch over our hand, remember? And so I'm going to add this backing to my cuff and cover up these ridges. Okay? Just like that. So I'm going to finish my seam, make a 1/2 inch seam allowance, fold it up, and I'm just going to tack it so that it stays up, because we still want it to be able to stretch. Okay? And I'll do that and I'll be back. Okay, so once I have my facing for my sleeve attached, I attached it with a 5/8 inch seam. I mean, you can do yours anyway, and again, I'm always using that lightning stitch or zigzag stitch, whatever stretch stitch that you have. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure all of the feathers are out of the way. Make sure you tuck them in nice and tight so that none of them get snagged. And then we're going to sew the rest of the sleeve closed. Okay, we're going to sew the sleeve closed all the way down to the facing. Just make sure to trim the inside of the seam, and then we're going to roll that seam over and close it up so it's like that. Okay? Alright, so let's tuck our feathers in and sew our seam closed, our arm closed. Once you have your facing for your cuff on, be sure to layer your seams so that you can reduce the bulk. That is very important. Layering is to trim one side of your seam down at least half the size of the other side. That's important because that is going to reduce any bulk, and because especially since this is velvet, we want to reduce the bulk. You see, you don't want to have 2 layers of seam. It'll be bulky. Okay, so pretty much this is what my sleeve looks like. So this is my facing for my cuff, 3 inches, and I did a nice 1/2 herringbone stitch. And so it's covering everything, all the work that was done on the inside. Okay. Looks really great. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you again for stopping by. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so that you can be reminded. Thanks again for watching.